During a recent trip to Austin, Texas, I had a chance to add another presidential library visit to my list. This time it was to check out the monstrous Lyndon B. Johnson Presidential Library and Museum. Approximately 125,000 visitors each year visit the massive 10-story museum, which is clad in cream Italian travertine. Johnson began planning his presidential library soon after his 1964 election victory. In February 1965, it was first proposed to build the library on the University of Texas campus. While most presidential libraries are funded by private donations, the publicly funded University of Texas paid $15 million of the $18 million needed to construct the complex and donated the land for the library. In a bit of irony, the Library for the President, known for waging war on poverty, was constructed on land which had been occupied by a low-income neighborhood, acquired by the university using the eminent domain proceedings, of course. First Lady Lady Bird Johnson worked with architects to design the large building. Construction began in 1967. When the library was dedicated on May 22, 1971, Johnson and President Richard Nixon attended, as did the Reverend Billy Graham. The first thing that greets visitors is a life-size bronze statue of LBJ. Once inside, the first display shows the presidential limousine used by Johnson beginning in 1968, the last full year of his presidency. The presidential seal on the black doors are especially impressive. Johnson served as president from November 22, 1963 until January 20, 1969, and in that time he signed hundreds of bills with special pens which were often given away to sponsoring legislators. Until the day of my visit, I had never seen this picture before. It's of an infant Claudia Alta Taylor, known today as Lady Bird Johnson, in the arms of her black nanny, Alice Tittle. Claudia was born in 1912 into a well-off family in Karnak, Texas. Her father, Thomas Jefferson Johnson Taylor, owned 2 general stores and 15,000 acres of land planted in cotton. Claudia was nicknamed Lady Bird because one of her caretakers said she was, quote, pretty as a ladybird. A letter on the wall written by her father explains how she didn't respond to being called Lady Bird, and apparently she never really liked the name. I was really interested to see the Bell Howell camera used by Lady Bird to film private moments of the Johnson family. I had seen these home movies before, so that's what intrigued me.
The LBJ Ranch, fall 1953. The flood has come and gone. There's Lyndon out in the blue panic grass with a bull with the delightful name of Friendly Mixer. And there is Melvin Winters, our good friend. At his house we stayed all the fall of 51 when we were working on the ranch till we finally moved in July of 52. There is Beagle. That dog always wanted the whole show, and Congressman Homer Thornberry, he and Eloise used to come out, and he's probably talking about how he painted the side of the house. He's looking up at the side of the house. The back seat of the pickup, tailgate of it, was the very favorite place for Linda and Lucy and all the children who came to visit. Lyndon out in the field with blonde Molly Thornberry and Lucy. Lyndon kissing his mother. And there's his sister Lucia in the background. Christmas was always a gathering of the clan, his kinfolks and mine. His were a little more numerous.
This 1937 campaign flyer is from Johnson's first run for the 10th Congressional District of Texas. This document here shows how Johnson was appointed to be the legislative secretary for newly elected Congressman Richard Kleberg. Johnson's own signature is affixed to the bottom. Here are a couple of campaign posters from his congressional elections, one showing how he was to appear at a Lockhart, Texas campaign event. Also on display is Lady Bird's deck chair, which was used by her while relaxing on the Austin Lake named for her. This red dress is the same one that Lady Bird wore at her husband's only inauguration at the U.S. Capitol.
The Committee for a More Beautiful Capital was born. Mrs. Johnson assembled her committee for the first time on February 11, 1965, at the White House. Its members were public officials, businessmen, architects, philanthropists, a true cross-section of the many Americans who wanted to improve the nation's capital. Ideas and inspiration began flowing at once.
Another unique feature is the exhibit featuring an animatronic LBJ.
I'm reminded of the story that the Postmaster General told me about getting a letter from a little boy who had lost his father and whose widowed mother was having difficulty making ends meet. And he wrote a letter to the Lord and said, "Dear God," said, "please send Mom $100 to help with the family." The letter wound up on the Postmaster General's desk, and he was quite touched by it. He, at that time, still had a little money left over from what he'd earned at Prudential. So he took a $20 bill out of his pocket and put it in the Postmaster General's envelope, and they'll stamp on it and sent it to the little boy. And about 2 weeks later, he got a letter back, said, "Dear God," said, "much obliged for all you've done," said, "it's great help, we appreciate it, but said, we need another $100. Said, "if you don't mind, when you send it to Mama this time, don't route it through Washington because it deducted 80%.
The original 1934 wedding license for Lyndon and Claudia to be married was on display as well. There is one amusing display where you can pretend like you're receiving the Johnson treatment, which is where he leaned his imposing frame over and into you as a bit of intimidation. My son decided to pose with his hand on his shoulder, something you didn't do in real life. My pose was a little more reflective of the intimidation. This display addresses the dark incident of November 22, 1963 in Dallas, and the clothing Vice President Johnson and Lady Bird were wearing that fateful day.
Friday, November 22nd. It all began so beautifully. After a drizzle in the morning, the sun came out bright and beautiful. We were going into Dallas. In the lead car, President and Mrs. Kennedy, John and Nellie, and then a Secret Service car full of men, and then our car, Lyndon and me, and Senator Yarborough. The streets were lined with people, lots and lots of children, all smiling, placards, confetti. Then almost at the edge of town, we were rounding a curve, going down a hill. Suddenly, there was a sharp, loud report, a shot. It seemed to me to come from the right, above my shoulder, from a building. Then one moment, and then two more shots in rapid succession. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, defend the Constitution of the United States.
So we kind of thought this was a giant waste of space here. All this giant building, most of it's just hollow.
This same room is where Johnson's body lay in repose after his death in January 1973. His casket was carried up the stairs past this photo-engraved mural depicting scenes from Johnson's life. After her death in July 2007, the body of Lady Bird Johnson lay in repose in the library and museum, just as her husband's had after his death 34 years earlier.
Going into the presidential portion. Here is a moon rock collected from Apollo 15 in 1971.
A lot of presidential libraries include artifacts reflecting on the culture of that day, this one highlighting movies, magazines, and fashion of that period, tang, books, and games. This display talks about the Arab-Israeli Six-Day War. Come to think of it, I don't remember seeing a whole lot about the Vietnam War. Apparently, these were Lyndon Johnson's favorite boots that he wore around the world from Vietnam to Australia and to his ranch in Texas, although never in the Oval Office. Here is a replica of the farmhouse. I understand that it's closed right now for renovation, but that's why we didn't go to it on this trip. Permit me to pause here and tell you about a visit that Sarah, I, and my son Jeremy made to the LBJ Ranch in Stonewall, Texas on October 3rd, 2014. Being a presidential enthusiast, the experience did not disappoint. Even Sarah got into the act by mugging with a cutout of LBJ at the LBJ State Park and Historic Site. One of the first sites that we saw was the reconstructed birthplace of LBJ, which was rebuilt in 1964 as a guest house. In front of the home is a display featuring a photo showing the Johnson clan in front of the original home where Lyndon was born in 1908. While the Johnson family gravesite is nearby, nobody is allowed inside the cemetery to see the headstones of Lyndon and Lady Bird Johnson up close, so they must be photographed from afar. From there, we drove across the expansive LBJ Ranch, which appears just as it did when Johnson was alive. We viewed the working stables where a ranch hand sat by to answer any questions that we may have had. Sitting beneath the large covering is the jet plane which LBJ used to land on the ranch airstrip when he was vice president. The airplane is sometimes jokingly referred to as Air Force 1.5, although any plane that carries the president is technically Air Force One when it's in the air. The National Park Service rescued this Lockheed Jetstar from the Pentagon's Boneyard in Tucson, Arizona. The government paid $261,000 to bring the plane to Texas to build the shelter and to restore the exterior with a new paint job replicating the outside of Air Force One. One of the things that I found inside the museum was the dictaphone which Johnson used to secretly record phone conversations. One of the photographs on display shows a young Lyndon with his 3 sisters and his younger brother. We then had the privilege of being led by a docent for a tour of the inside of the Johnson home, which I had seen so many times in photographs. The wood-paneled home office allowed us to see where the president officiated business when he wasn't at the White House. While in the family room, I couldn't help but notice the 3 TV sets near the doorway. I heard stories that Johnson liked to have all 3 sets going at the same time to watch the news coverage of the only 3 networks at that time, ABC, CBS, and NBC. We had a chance to walk through LBJ's very dated kitchen and the formal dining room that had hosted presidents, royalty, and other celebrities. We were able to see the closets filled with hat boxes and gifts that LBJ would present to VIPs. I'm not sure why I didn't take any photographs of the bedroom, but we were allowed to go inside and see the very bed that Johnson suffered his fatal heart attack on in January of 1973. As we exited the side door of the house, we could see the kidney-shaped swimming pool that Johnson had constructed after his 1955 heart attack. In this photograph of LBJ and Arthur Godfrey, the cabana is being constructed in the background. Johnson also enjoyed swimming in this pool with his grandson Patrick. Another fun exhibit was the 1965 Corvette Stingray given by the President and First Lady to daughter Lucy for her 18th birthday. It would be very easy to overlook these jewels near the driveway. They are cement blocks upon which various visitors would sign their names in wet cement. They included Texas Senator Lloyd Bentsen, Air Force General Curtis LeMay, and singer Eddie Arnold, who dropped by in 1959. Then there's Agricultural Secretary Orville Freeman, Interior Secretary Stuart Udall and his wife Lee, Admiral Chester Nimitz, who visited in April 1961, and a once political rival, John F. Kennedy, who spent the night at the ranch in November 1960. On that visit, JFK apparently was reluctantly coaxed into shooting a deer on the property and later felt terrible about it. We also did a photo op in front of the famous house, similar to this one of LBJ and Lady Bird shortly before his death. On the way out, we stopped by the old one-room Junction Schoolhouse where LBJ was a student. So check it out, we're in Lyndon Johnson's Oval Office. At least a replica of it. It's pretty cool.
Most people come into the office with great dreams, and they leave it with many satisfactions and some disappointments, and always some of their dreams have not come true. And I'm no exception. But I'm so grateful and so proud that I've had my chance. And as to how successful we've been in doing the greatest good for the greatest number, the people themselves and their posterity must ultimately decide.
So apparently, Lady Bird had an office here, and this is it. It looks out over Austin.
The view of the Texas State Capitol from the library's terrace became protected by state and local law from obstruction by tall buildings in 1983. We trust that you enjoyed our look back at the Lyndon Johnson Presidential Library in Austin and learned some things about our 36th president and his wife. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and leave a comment. Let us know what, if anything, you heard here was new to you about LBJ. If you want to see more of our videos, check out what we have published under the Video tab. And please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any future episodes of History Hunters. Thank you.